Kolodzey family of Stara Lubovnia, Video 5.2, John Jacob Kolodgy, Alice Brecht and Mary Kugel. Please view video 8.1, 7.6, and 6.3 before watching this video to better understand the known history of the Kolodzey family up to this point. John Jacob Kolodgy was born on the 26th of January, 1898 in Newark, New Jersey to parents Franciscus Kolodzey and Maria Irma Pekar. His parents were 27 and 25 respectively. At the time of his birth, the family lived at 56 Prince Street in Newark, New Jersey. A month after his birth, on the 27th of February, 1898, John Jacob was baptized in Newark, New Jersey where Franciscus and Irma had married years before. In 1900, the U.S. Census showed John Jacob as a 2-year-old born in New Jersey in January of 1898, living next door to Stephen Ronkovitz's family. Stephen and his wife, Julia Caletta, were both from Stara Lubovnia. They lived on Melvin Avenue in Richmond on Staten Island, New York. It is interesting to note John Jacob's year of birth and age in the U.S. Census, shown as a 2-year-old born in 1898. Later on, John's Army service documents listed his year of birth at 1896. We are unsure of the reason for the discrepancy, but this would complicate his Social Security eligibility later in life. Before his 10th birthday, both of John Jacob's parents had died. Because of this, we have very little information about John Jacob's childhood. In 1907, while living at 93 Hall Avenue in Perth Amboy, New Jersey, John's mother Irma died, leaving John Jacob and his brothers as orphans. A couple of families stepped up to care for a few of the boys, but the youngest son Charles was turned over to an orphanage. In 1910, the U.S. Census showed John Jacob living a few blocks away from where his mother had passed away at 526 Penn Street with Mary Dluga-Linsky, whom the New York Tribune later named as his mother's sister, Mrs. Linsky. Mary Linsky was, in fact, the daughter of his grandfather's brother. Mary's husband, Charles Dluga-Linsky, had served as a witness to Franciscus's and Irma's marriage return, which you may recall as Document A. But he had passed away just a year before, so Mary was the lone head of the household with her children Charles, Adela, and William along with her adopted nephew John Jacob. According to a newspaper article written in 1918, John Jacob went to school at St. Patrick's Parochial School, which was founded in 1863, and was the oldest parochial school in New Jersey. So, John Jacob was well educated and likely built connections that shaped his days to follow. Before 1917, John Jacob held jobs at the Singer Sewing Factory, the Commercial Express Company, and later at the Deal Manufacturing Company, which made electric motors like those used in sewing machines. On the 2nd of July, 1917, while employed at Deal Manufacturing, John Jacob enlisted in the New York National Guard ahead of action in World War I. John Jacob Kolodgy's service in World War I is chronicled in Video 5.2.1. In the year following his return from World War I, John married Alice Emily Brecht on the 11th of September, 1919 in New York City. On that date, John listed his address as 215 West 126th Street and Alice lived at 620 Leicester Street. Alice listed her age as 17, which did not match documents prior to the marriage. On the 1920 U.S. Census, John was 21 and his wife Alice was listed as 15 years old, which did match other documents. It is important to note that Alice's father had also died in 1907, leaving her mother with children to raise without a steady income. Alice and her sister Regina had lived in an orphanage in 1910 and likely desired to leave it as soon as possible. John and Alice had a son that they named John Jr. on the 5th of July, 1920, followed by the birth of Jean Adele on the 16th of November, 1921. Jean's name at birth was Adele Marie, but changed to Jean Adele sometime after. Years later, John and Alice's marriage soured, and although they remained officially married, they lived separate lives until the dissolution of their marriage decades later. By 1925, John lived at 14 East 127th Street in New York City. He was 30 years old and worked as a commercial laborer. In 1930, John lived at 332 Frisbee Avenue together with his older brother Frank in the Johnson home. John worked as a private chauffeur for the Johnson family headed by Marie Kugel Johnson. Marie listed her father's home country as France, but then again, so did John and Frank. In 1932, John and Marie's youngest child, Joyce, was born. On the 1940 census, John and Marie were listed as living together at 2959 Schley Avenue in Bronx, New York. Shirley, 20, John, 19, and Jean, 18, were adults residing with them along with the two younger children Evelyn, 17, and Joyce, 7. John Sr. was working as a doorman at the Concourse Plaza Hotel, per his draft card, while John Jr. worked in a butcher shop, maybe with his Uncle Frank's old employer. Shirley worked in a cosmetics factory and Jean was a saleslady in a candy store. Eldest daughters, Gladys and Dorothy, were not listed as living with them in 1940. Interestingly, Shirley was reported to have earned $936, making Shirley the apparent breadwinner that year. Their combined income was the largest on their census sheet. In 1942, despite already serving during World War I, John registered for the draft at 46 years old and was measured at 5 feet 11 inches and 165 pounds. Like his father before, John Jr. also signed up for service in the military. And like his father, he soon found himself in combat service as World War II raged in Europe. John Jr. enlisted on the 14th of August, 1942 on Governor's Island, New York and reported for duty 2 weeks later on the 28th of August, 1942 and served until the 29th of October, 1945. Like his father before, he attained the rank of Private First Class. 1948 was a big year for John Jacob's family. In February, John Jr. married an Arbellino. Together they had 3 children. In April, Jean married George Vincent Hines II. Together they had 2 children. The photograph on the lower left shows their families together sometime before 1968. On the 2nd of July, 1958, John and Alice Brecht finalized their decades-long separation with a divorce through dissolution. The next year, John and Marie received their marriage license and were married. John's ex-wife Alice died just 3 years later in 1961 in Denville, New Jersey at age 57. In 1963, John worked as a dispatcher for Lincoln Transportation Company and lived at 2385 Williams Bridge Road in Bronx. On the 30th of January, 1963, John died at the age of 67. He was buried at St. Raymond's Roman Catholic Churchyard in Bronx, New York, just blocks away from where he had lived on Schley Avenue. Marie lived as a widow for another 17 years before she passed away in Bronx in 1980. She was laid to rest alongside her beloved husband in St. Raymond's. This concludes video 5.2. Please view video 5.2.1, which chronicles John Jacob's service and travels in France during World War I. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for notifications for future releases.